you're a card maker and you love to give your cards as a handmade gift, I have the perfect box for you. I have 5 handmade cards in this box, and they do have a little dimension to them. I also have 5 envelopes to coordinate with this. You can see there's a little decoration here. There's a little decoration on the front. It does have a magnet closure, and I even added a place over here that you can use this whole box as a card and write your message here. And if you're looking for a customized envelope for this box, I made one of those too, so I'll give you the measurements and show you how to put this together also. To get started, I already cut out the 3 pieces of cardstock that we'll need. For the base of the card, we'll need a piece that is 7 3/4 by 9. For the outside flap, we'll need a piece that is 6 by just a hair over 6 1/4. So basically 6 by 6 1/4, but like I said, I added just a smidge more to the 6 1/4 side. And then for the inside pocket, I have a piece that is 3 by 5 3/4. And we do have to do a little bit of scoring on each of these pieces. So I'll start with the pocket because that's the easiest to score. On the pocket, you're just going to score this at a 1/2 inch on 3 sides. So a 1/2 inch on both of the short sides and a 1/2 inch going across the long side. And the top side here, we don't need a score mark at all. Now for the 6 by 6 1/4 piece, you're going to make sure that it's in at the 6 1/4, because 6 1/4 and 6 aren't that much difference. Just make sure you double check to make sure that your piece is in on the 6 1/4 side. And on this, we're going to score at 3/4 of an inch and again at 1 1/2 inches. So for this piece, we just have 2 score marks at 3/4 of an inch and 1 1/2 inches. Now for the bigger base part of the card, we have a little bit more scoring to do, but it's not complicated. So it doesn't matter which side you start on, because we're going to make the same 2 score marks on all 4 sides of this piece. So once you have it in your scoreboard, you're going to score at 3/4 of an inch and then again at 1 1/2 inches. Then turn it once and same thing, the same measurements. We're going to score at 3/4 of an inch and 1 1/2 inches. And like I said, we're doing that to all 4 sides. So even though we have a lot of scoring to do, it's all the same measurements. 3/4, then 1 1/2 inches. And you can see here, all the score lines are the same on all 4 sides. I do have some cuts to make on our biggest piece. So this is the piece that is 7 3/4 by 9. So we do have some cuts to make. And I did go ahead and make a template. I'm going to lay this here so you can take a screenshot of it. And everywhere you see that I have it colored in, those are the squares that we're going to cut out. I wanted to make this template on a brighter piece of cardstock so you could see it better. So in each corner of our box, we're going to cut out the 3 corners. And we're going to leave one of the corners as a tab. So I'm just going to go in with my snips, and when I'm cutting these, I'm making sure that I'm cutting away the score line completely. So you can see here that here's the first corner. It kind of makes like a stair step here. And then on the other side, we're going to do the same thing. And like I said, I'm cutting out the score line completely. I'm not leaving any of that score line in place there. All of it is coming away. And we're just going to repeat that on all 4 sides. I'm cutting away all of the 3 outside blocks, and I'm just leaving that center square in. That's going to be the tab that helps us put this whole box together. And we have one more corner here. So again, just cut out all 3 of these squares. And we leave that center square to be our tab. So I'll set this down. You can see that's what it's going to look like when you have everything cut out. It looks like you have little staircases in each of the corners. Now, like I said, these squares that we left intact, these are going to be the tabs that are going to help us put the box together. So what I want to do at this point is a little bit of mitering. So I have the long side facing me. So this is the 9-inch side. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to cut right up that score line. And then I'm just going to take a little piece out on each side so that I have a nice little tab shape. And then also from this score line out to the bottom here, I'm just going to miter that a bit also. So you can see I took out little pie shapes on both sides of the tab, and then from this score mark to the edge I created another little angle just on this outside tab. So we'll do that again on this side. And remember, I'm only working on the long side of the paper. So this is the 9-inch side. So we'll cut our little tab here first. So we have a little miter here in the corner. Then I'm gonna cut up there to the score line, take out a little pie piece, and take out another little pie piece. So you can see I have 2 tabs here, and then this outer flap has a miter on each corner. So now I'm going to repeat that on the other long side. I'll start here, cut out my little tab, cut up my score line, and cut out a little wedge on each side of this tab. And one more side here, we just got to take out that little corner, cut up to the score line, and remove some of that bulk by taking out little pie wedges on each side. So that's what it's going to look like on all 4 sides when you have all of your cuts done. Now this is the piece for our pocket, which is 3 inches by 5 3/4. And you've probably made gusseted pockets before. They're pretty easy. So I like to always take the corner off of each of the tops of my pockets. And then again, we're going to cut right through the intersection of these 2 score lines to take some of the bulk out so that we can fold our flaps up and it won't get too bulky when we create our pocket. And then our last piece, this is the 6 by 6 1/4. The only thing that I'm going to do to this piece is just take a little wedge off of each end of this end flap. So you can see I cut a piece just from that first score line down to the edge, and then again on this side, just from the first score line down to the edge. And that's all the cutting we have to do for the 3 pieces. Now I want to get started on forming my box. The reason I have 2 score marks on the outside of each of the box is because I wanted to reinforce the walls a bit more just to make it a little sturdier. So I'm going to go ahead and work on those first. I'm going to fold both of my score lines in towards the center, and I'm just going to use some of my wet glue on this outer flap here. And I'm going to fold that right up into that second score mark. And I always like to use my bone folder to really get that glue pressed into place. So we're going to do that on the short side as well. We're going to fold the one flap up and then the other flap up. Now here, if you feel like you're not going to be able to get your flap in, you might want to take a little bit of a piece off of this outside flap. I always just like to fold it first and see how it looks. This one looks pretty good. It looks like it's going to clear those score marks. So I'm going to let that go. And I'm going to run my bone folder and just make sure that that glue is really adhered down. And then the same thing here. Now you can see I'm not using my bone folder to press anything into place yet. I'm more worried about just getting my flaps glued down. I'm not worried about getting those edges too sharp and crisp yet because I'm doing this step just as a little extra reinforcement and a little extra stability in my cardstock. And this is 65-pound cardstock, by the way, so if you were using something heavier, like 110-pound, you may not have to create these little extra walls on the box, but I didn't have any 110-pound cardstock on hand, so I figured I could still just use my normal 65-pound, but give my walls a little more stability. Okay, so now that I have everything glued into place, now I'm going to fold this second score mark up again, and this is where I'm going to use my bone folder just to crease it so that it has a nice crisp edge there, so it'll stand up nice and straight when I go to put my box together. And I'm just going to do that on all 4 sides. Now that I have my flap folded up and doubled over, I can take my bone folder and just make sure I really have that crease worked in for all 4 sides of my box. All right, now we can assemble the box. So what I like to do is start on one side, and I always like to use wet glue whenever I assemble a box because it just gives me a little bit of time to really get everything lined up and squared in. If you use something like a double-sided tape, you're kind of like a one and done, right? The tape is so sticky, and once you get that tab into place there, you got to kind of make sure you get it lined up on the first try. But with the wet adhesive, you can really take your time a bit and get that nice and squared up. And when you feel like the box has a nice shape and the edges are nice and lined up, then you can just hold that wet adhesive in there for a second and it'll be in place, and you didn't get any kind of warping or a funny edge or anything like that. So I have 3 tabs in, and I just need to place my 4th one in. And remember, with the art glitter glue, less is more. And I know I'm using black cardstock here, so it always looks like I'm putting a ton of glue on, but I'm really not putting that much on. All right, so you can see here's the base of our card box, and the walls are nice and sturdy because we have 2 layers of cardstock on each of the walls. And then now we can get to work on the little pocket that's going to go inside. So I'm just going to go ahead and fold up all of my little flaps on my gusseted pocket here. Make sure all my corners are lined up pretty good. So on the pocket here, traditionally when you make a gusseted pocket like this for a mini album or something like that, you're going to take all 3 sides and glue them flat down. It's a little different for the box because we can't glue it flat down in the back, right? Because it's a little too big. We need this to sit out front of our box so that we can tuck our cards behind it. So I'm going to go about this just a little bit different. I'm going to start by putting glue on my bottom flap here, and I'm going to get that in place first. So what I'm going to do is lay this into my box. I'll show you here in a minute, and I'm going to lay it in and just line that score mark up with the edge of my box. So you probably can't see it, but that's where my 1/2 inch score mark is, right there lined up with the bottom of my box. And I'm just going to give that a little press, make sure that glue is in there good. Okay, and then what we can do is fold this up and line it up with the outside edges of our box. So I'm going to go ahead and put some wet adhesive here on both of my flaps. And I'm just going to tuck that into both sides of my box. And I want to make sure that the front side of the pocket is lined up with the top edge of my box, and I'll show you that here in a minute. I just have to be able to get my hand in there to make sure that glue gets stuck down. And then you can stand it up, and if you can even put your bone folder in there to really make sure that adhesive is working those 2 sections together. Whoops. Okay, so there's our pocket. So you can see the surface of the pocket is nice and lined up with the top side of the box. This gives us a nice deep pocket, and because this is 3/4 of an inch wide here, that means we have 3/4 of an inch of a pocket now for our card box. And the last thing we need to do is attach the flap that's going to go over the front of the box. So I'm just going to give my 2 score marks a nice little press here. We don't have to go crazy trying to crease these down. Now gluing this in place is a little different. So I'm going to show you first before I actually add the adhesive. So I'm going to start by lining my box up on that first flap. So I'll lay this flat here, see if you can see. The edge of my box is lined up with that first score mark. And then I'm going to line up the edge of the box with that center part, and then the whole thing will flap over. So that's why I said I needed it just a smidge longer than 6 1/4. It wasn't, I didn't need enough length to go up to 6 3/8. I just needed a smidge more to make up for the fact that we're gonna take up a little bit of space with 2 score marks. I hope that makes sense. You'll see once you go to put this together, if you would cut a piece that is exactly 6 1/4, when you would go to fold this up, because those score marks do take up a bit of room, then when you would fold your flap over, it wouldn't quite be wide enough to make it the whole way across the box. So you can see I added my glue, and now I'm putting my box on, and I went right up to that first score line, but I didn't cross over it because I want to be able to bring this up. If you would cross over that score line, you would get some resistance here when you're trying to bring this flap up. So now that I have that in place, I can add my glue right to this center. And now I can bring this up and get that onto the spine of our box. So we kind of created a book here, almost a mini book. We have a little pocket in the back, and then we have our flap on the front. And then if you want to open this up, and you can really get your bone folder in that pocket there and really work that adhesive down. So it kind of wrapped around. So here's our flap, and then we have the extra cardstock here, and then you can see here's the backside flap here. But don't worry about seeing this, because I'm going to put some pattern cardstock on the back here, so you're not really going to see this flat piece here. I just wanted this to wrap around rather than gluing a piece here, because I wanted the edges of this to be nice and finished, like a nice fold on here. If I wouldn't have added this extra flap, it would have been okay, but you would have seen where the cardstock ended here. So by adding this extra flap, it kind of hides it along the back side. Okay, now we can start working on some decorations. I already pre-cut the scrapbook paper that I'll need to get my box decorated and covered. So you can see here, I have 2 pieces that measure 5 3/4 by 4 1/2. I have one piece that is 4 1/2 by 2 1/4. And then I just have a small decorative piece. This was just a scrap from when I cut this side out. And it's 4 1/2 inches wide, and it's about 3/4 of an inch wide. This is just for decoration. This isn't any kind of covering or anything. I just had a little piece left over from this, so I figured I would just cut that and use it. Now, before I put any of this paper on, I do want to add a magnet to my box for a closure. So what I did on my first box is I put the magnet more in the center, and that didn't quite work because it gave me too much wiggle room when I was trying to open the flap of this box. So what I mean by that is when you're opening this, if you pull this open and the magnet is here, you're going to end up bending this cardstock a good bit trying to get it open. So what I'm going to do this time is add my magnet more into the bottom left-hand corner of my piece. And I just have a set of the basic gray magnets. I get these online. These are really handy to use because they already have the adhesive backing on them, and they come in a pack like this, and you can see the magnets have pluses and minuses, so that way you know which magnet you're going to need, one plus and one minus. So I'm going to go ahead and start by taking the adhesive back off of one side, and I'm going to start over, actually I'm going to start here, because when I put my magnet down, I want to make sure that I have about a 1/2 inch leeway on both sides. I don't want my magnet too close to the edge because I need to get some paper over top of there. So I'm going to leave about a 1/2 inch of space on either side of my magnet. I'm just going to drop that down and reach in and give it a press because it does have that adhesive on it, so it'll stay pretty well for me. And then I'll just need to remove this backing here, and there we go. And whenever I close this, because we did already glue this cardstock to the spine, I just need to get this closed. I don't have to worry about lining anything up, and give it a press so that it can grab onto that cardstock. And we'll separate the magnets here. There we go. And then I can press it a little bit harder. And you can see it left me about a 1/2 inch gap around this side too, so I'll be able to get my paper on. Now for the pocket piece here, that's why I cut this piece, because that's going to go over here. I also did cut a card mat. This is 5 3/4 by 4 1/2. So what I would recommend is cut this so that you have it ready, but don't glue it on here yet. And I'm only saying that because there is going to be a magnet in the bottom left-hand corner. So if you want to write a whole message on this card mat, it might be a little bit tricky when you hit this magnet underneath. So if you're going to pre-make a lot of these to give as gifts, I would say get your card mats ready that you need for the inside of this box, but don't glue them on until you write what you're going to write on the inside. So I'm going to just tuck that into my pocket for now so that I know I have it. So when I'm ready to give this as a gift, before I add my cards and envelopes, I can pull this out, write on it, and then attach it to the inside flap of this card. But everything else can be attached and decorated at this point. So I'm going to go ahead, and these two pieces that I had showed you that I cut before, one's going to go on the cover and one's going to go on the back. And then this smaller piece, like I said, will get attached right to the pocket on the inside. The decorating on this box fairly simple, and the paper that I'm using is from this collection by Echo Park called Jingle All the Way. So I'm just going to dig into the sticker sheet that comes with this collection, and this little strip that I had cut from scrap, like I mentioned before, I'm going to start by adding some glue to this and just laying it down the center of my card front. And I did open this up and I have it laid flat like this just because it makes it a little bit easier to work on the cover here. So here's my little strip that I cut. I'm just going to place that right in the center there. And then I'm just going to pick out a sticker. On the first box that I made, I added a journal card and I did add some dimension to it. And it looks good and it does fit in the little envelope that I'm going to show you how to make. But I decided for this one not to add any dimension to the front of my card because I wanted to leave as much bulk out as I could. I like this snowman, so I'm going to go with him. I was going to use that Christmas tree at first because I liked the green, but with that green strip in there, he kind of got lost. So we'll use this little snowman, and it's nice because he does have this, it might be hard to see, he has a wood grain border around him, so it'll help him pop off the page a little bit. So I'm just going to add my snowman right to the top of the strip, and then maybe I can find a little saying. There's not many. Oh, here's a little one. This one should show up. So we'll put this maybe right underneath him. It just says, whoops, it just says, "We wish you a Merry Christmas." So we'll just put that right underneath our snowman here just for a little bit of decoration. There we go. That makes for a cute card front. Nice and simple. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. And then for the inside pocket, I just want to add a small sticker for the inside. Well, let's use, there's some holly leaves and a snowflake here, so maybe we'll put those in. So I'm just going to place my little holly leaves in the corner of my pocket, and we'll put a little snowflake underneath it. And then we'll add this little Very Merry next to it. I always like to group up stickers. And I love that Echo Park always puts a nice full sticker sheet in with their collections. So see, nothing too complicated. And I definitely don't want any dimension here in the pocket because I don't want it to interfere with the flap closing. And then I always like, when I make albums or anything like that, I always like to add a little sticker to the bottom center. So I'm just going to pull one of these snowflakes and we'll just stick that in the back just for a little something extra. There we go. So here's our nice card box. And remember, if you're not a card maker, it's okay. You don't have to put cards in. This is a nice deep pocket. This is 3/4 of an inch. So you could add things like hot cocoa pouches and candy canes. You could add some homemade cookies or other small treats. You could throw in a gift card with maybe a pair of fuzzy socks, anything that you can fit in this pocket. It's a pretty deep pocket, so it doesn't have to just be for cards. But I know a lot of people make cards and they like to give them as gifts. And even though this is for Christmas, you could put just everyday cards in here if you're going to give this as a Christmas gift, and then they could keep it in this box. Or you could even make the box to coordinate with the cards that you're going to give. So I just want to show you how 5 of these cards will fit really well inside of this box. I have my 5 envelopes here. These aren't handmade. These are just ones that I buy in bulk. They're A2 size envelopes. So I'm going to tuck those in the back first. And then I have 5 simple cards that I made. And like I said, they do have a layer of dimension. So this journal card that's on the front of each of the cards has foam behind it. I know it's kind of hard to see on camera. And I do have a little bit of bling down here. So you can probably see from the side here, there you can see the foam a little bit. So these are a little bit thicker. So that's why I'm only going to put 5 in. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the first 3 and just leave them plain. And then the last 2, I'm going to flip backwards just because it helps keep it a little bit flatter on the surface that way. And then I can tuck these right in. Now, when you make cards, if you don't add dimension to the front of these, I'd imagine you could probably get a few more in here. Now, 5 fits in here pretty well. It is pushing out on the envelope a little bit, but it's not going to hinder that magnet or anything like that. And you can see from the top here, it bows it out ever so slightly, but it's not going to interfere with adding it to the envelope that we're about to make. So if you make cards without dimension, I would say you probably could get about 8 in here rather than 5, but I always like to have a little dimension on mine, and I think 5 is a good place to start. And I actually saw on, I think it was on May Made It, she was making a box to give cards in, and she had a really great idea where she said when you're giving this to someone, you could either write a note or just tell them when they use up the 5 cards that are in here, let them know that you'll be happy to make more for them. So it's kind of a gift that you can just keep giving throughout the year. All right, I want to show you really quick how to make a box style envelope that will fit around that card box. Obviously you could give that just like it is, or even put it in a gift bag or wrap it with wrapping paper, but I did want to give you the option to create a box for it as well. So I'm going to start with a piece of 12 by 12 cardstock that's in my scoreboard here, and since it's 12 by 12 it doesn't matter which side you put it on first, and we do have to make a couple score marks. So I'm going to start by scoring at 2 5/8, 3 1/2, 8 1/2, and 9 3/8. And then I'm going to turn it once. So now my score marks are running horizontal with my scoreboard, and we have a couple more scores to make. So I'm going to start by scoring at 1 7/8, 8, and 8 7/8. And don't worry, I'll have all of the measurements for the paper and all of the score marks and everything in the description below. All right, I had to zoom out here a little bit because I wanted to show you, I made another template because we're gonna have to do a lot of cutting on this piece as well. So go ahead, if you need to, take a screenshot here, and then I'll get to showing you what we need to cut away. So where these smaller score marks here, this is where we scored it 1 inch and then 1 7/8. That's gonna be the bottom of our envelope. So you can see I'm cutting out all of the squares that are gonna be on the sides here. And then down here where the first score line is a bit wider, this is going to be the top flap of our envelope. So we have bigger squares to cut out here, and I just drew X's so that, because I didn't feel like coloring all of that in. So you know we're going to take out all of these squares on the side. And I wanted to show you that on a piece of brighter cardstock, because this silver cardstock that I'm using, it's a little bit tricky. I think the lines are showing up pretty well on camera, but just in case you couldn't see that, I wanted you to be able to see what you need to cut out. So starting here with our smaller score lines, I'm going to go ahead and cut away all 4 of these outer boxes. So we have 2 rectangle style boxes and then 2 small boxes in the corner, and they're all coming away. And just like when I created that card box, I cut that score line completely out. I didn't leave any of that score line. And this is where these larger snips kind of come in handy, because they do have a longer blade on them. So it is easier to make these longer cuts and have them be more accurate. Now down on this bigger side, so here's where we cut the small squares out. So we're coming to the complete opposite side of what we just cut, and we're cutting this whole square out of each side of the bottom. So we're going to go to the innermost score line, and like I said, I'm cutting that score line away. So I'm on the outside of that score line, and I'm taking all of this out of the way. So there's one, and then we're going to do the same thing on this side. I'm cutting up that score line on the outside, so none of that score line is left, and also going this way. So what you have left out of your 12 by 12, I'll flip this around. So up here at the top, this wider piece, this is going to be the top flap of our envelope, and then we have our 2 sides and the bottom. Now this is totally optional. You don't have to do this at all, but I am going to go ahead and round the corners of my top flap. So like I said, this wider piece that's at the top, that's going to be the part that flaps over on our box here. So I'm going to go ahead and round the corners of the top flap and the bottom flap, because you will see those after it's all put together. And I think it just gives it a nice look. But like I said, it's totally optional. You don't have to do this step. It's just something I like to do, especially for that top flap, because that is going to be opened and closed. So sometimes when you round the corners of things, it just helps keep it from getting beat up and tattered. Now I'm going to go ahead and get all of my score lines pressed down here with my bone folder, and I'm just folding everything towards the center. So you can see when I get to both sides here, I'm folding them in towards the center. Give it a little press, and then the same thing with the second one. Get that nice and lined up and pressed into place. And then the same thing with the bottom here. I'm going to line it up to the top, give it a little press, get that second flap pressed in, and then we just have one more side. On these side pieces, if you kind of check as you're folding these in, just make sure that you have clearance on either side where these score lines are. It'll just make it a little easier to fold up if you're cleared of those score lines. If you're not, if it looks like it went over a little bit, like maybe you didn't get that whole score line cut out, just trim off a little sliver until it's going to close up. All right, I zoomed in just a little bit more so you can see how we're going to assemble this envelope. It's really easy. So I'm going to start here. I'm going to fold one of my flaps completely in on the side. So remember, this longer, wider flap is the top, and then we have our bottom, and these are the 2 side flaps. So I'm going to fold one of the side flaps completely in. I'm just going to take my wet adhesive, and I'm going to run a very small line of adhesive down the one side. I know this is hard to see because this paper is metallic, so it has a little bit of a glare, but you can see I just ran a bead of glue right down the side of the flap here. And then I can take my other flap and fold it over and get that adhesive really pushed in. The reason I'm doing it that way is because I only have about 1/4 of an inch of overlap for these 2 side flaps. So that's why I didn't want to use sticky tape, because the narrowest sticky tape I have is 3/8 of an inch. If you have 1/4 inch sticky tape, you probably could work that there. But so then all we have to do is stand this back up, and now we have the opening of our box. So that's why it was just easier to lay this down and get that glue on that way, and then the box easily folds back up. And then this will go on the outside. If you wanted to, you could tuck this into the box also, but then you run the risk of it coming open, and it won't be as easy to slide our card box in because of this little flap being on the outside. So that's why I rounded my corners, because I knew it was going to show on the outside of the box, which I'm fine with. You know, I don't mind that at all, but having the rounded corners just makes it look a little bit neater. So now we can square the box up here and get our bottom flap in. And I'm going to go ahead and get my bone folder in there so I can really press up on that glue and make sure this flap is down. And then I'll flip the whole box over and really get my bone folder in there and make sure that that flap is nice and glued down. And then I wouldn't put any kind of, you could run a piece of sticky tape across here if you want to. I'm going to let this dry for a second before I slide my box in. But you can see when this flaps back over, you would just have to add a little bit of sticky tape here so that it could flap back over. So here's the card box that we made in the beginning with our magnet. Here's my card that I'll write on later and attach over to this side. I have all 5 of my cards that I want to give as a gift in here. And like I said, this will slide right in here with no problem. So even if you did add a little dimension to the front of that card box, it's still going to fit in here nice, and that flap will come over, and you have all of these nice finished edges. So if you want to give this as a gift, you could just add a bow and a little gift tag, and it's ready to go. So another suggestion I want to give you for this envelope in particular, for this card box, is if you have more paper left from your paper collection, this was just made with a 12 by 12 paper. So you could use a coordinating piece of your scrapbook paper to make this envelope. I was running kind of low with the paper that I have left in this collection. I have some more projects that I want to do, so that's why I just went ahead and used a piece of plain cardstock for my envelope. Now, this envelope that I made, I probably wouldn't ship in this. If you're sending this gift to somebody that's out of town, I wouldn't use this to ship it in. Even though it is plain, you could write an address on it. I would just be afraid of it getting beat up in the mail. So if you're going to send this to somebody, you can put it in here, but then I would probably put this whole thing in in a bubble mailer and mail it that way. But this is a nice way to just give somebody a whole nice finished product. And like I said, if you're going to make everyday note cards for in here, you can coordinate the box to match those cards too. Or like I said, if you're giving it as a Christmas gift, make the box in Christmas paper, and then you can make the cards in any style that you want. And keep in mind, like I said, that suggestion from May, when you're giving this to somebody, offer to make them more cards once they run out of the cards that you already gave them. All right, everyone, thanks so much for coming to hang out with me again today. Remember, if you decide to make something like this, I'd like to see it. So if you're on Instagram, you can tag me over there at gluelalacrafts. All right, everyone, enjoy your holidays. Have a great week, and I'll talk to you in the next one.